All right, the line is out for Georgia and Mississippi State. Another big game this time. Georgia's last game on the road in the SEC. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the season. It took so long to get here, and now there are only 4 games left. This one on the road in Starkville, Georgia, a 7.5 point favorite to beat the Bulldogs. I saw this game come out initially at 10.5. Our friends at BetQL have got this game as Mississippi State being a 6 point favorite. A lot, if not all, nearly all of the sharp money is on Mississippi State so far this week. We'll see if this thing adjusts at all over time. I expect it to be anywhere from a 6 to 8 point line. I think that Georgia has not proven that they are going to do anything other than play close games. Yeah, they should have covered on Saturday night. You're talking about a couple of easy steps from a cover, but that didn't happen. Georgia did not play well against the Gators. So it's just one of those things where I think, your brain is going to tell you to take Mississippi State in this game because, State can really score. First of all, State can really score. All right, let's just start with that. You take a look at their games this season, even in their losses, they've scored a fair amount of points. Against Tennessee in overtime, they lose. They score 34 points. Against the Gators, they only scored 21. Against Texas, they scored 38 in an overtime loss. Against Arkansas, they scored 38 in a straight-up win, a come-from-behind win. They did struggle against Texas A&M. That was a game where they just really were not competitive at all. They lost 31-9. But beyond that, State is definitely not far from being probably a 3-2 team in the league, if not more like 4-1. So this is a State team that is 8-1 against the line. Georgia's 3-5. So State has already played 9 games, though. I will say that's one thing to me that this time of year you're starting to get to the point where you're looking for the bye week. Texas gets their bye coming into Georgia. Texas is going to be off this week. Texas really played well against Vanderbilt for 3 quarters and then did not play well at all in the fourth. So, I'm probably leaning towards taking State so far. I want to watch them a little bit more. I saw some of the Arkansas highlights. They definitely, did not play the way they wanted to, the bulk of that Arkansas game. But at the end of the day, they won it. And, this is a game Georgia can lose. There's a lot of games Georgia plays, and almost all of them are games that Georgia can lose. I don't think they'll lose the game, but I do think it makes perfect sense to take State and the free points. Just this week in the SEC alone, there's a lot of relatively tight games across the league in terms of the line. Florida, Kentucky is a 3-point line. State, Georgia is 7.5. You talk about Kentucky and Mizzou and A&M is 7. A&M's a 7-point favorite at Auburn. At Mizzou, Texas A&M is a 7-point favorite at Mizzou. Auburn is a 7-point dog in Nashville. You would think maybe that would be slightly higher. There's just a lot of clubs. The widest margin is Alabama at home against LSU is a 10-point favorite. So, every time I do that. So there's not, the sort of gaudy lines that we've seen in the past. They're just not around anymore. And mainly because the league is just not playing games like this. Is not the Big Ten where you have, what looks like 2 really good teams. You have Oregon, and then you have the rest of the league, which is just not great. It's fine. I would be curious to see what Mississippi State would do in the Big Ten. I'd be very curious to see what they would do in that league. I think for Georgia, you're going into a game here where you're going to have to manage what State does, and they can score. Like I say, they can score a lot of points. They have a good win against Arizona State team that is okay. It's not a great Arizona State team. they've beaten TCU, they've beaten Baylor. Those were close games. They got absolutely lit up by Utah. They upset Texas Tech. They narrowly lost to Houston, and they beat Iowa State. So this is that's a good win for State, but they don't have much else on their schedule to really discuss besides tight losses. And you could see that this weekend. The other thing, I expect Georgia to win, but I don't know how comfortable I am saying I expect them to cover. The other thing to remember about this week is, Tuesday night you're going to have the first college football playoff rankings. I don't know if Georgia will be 5 or 6. I can't imagine they'd be much lower than that, considering, teams like Notre Dame have 2 losses. Georgia's got to win over at least 2 ranked teams in Tennessee and certainly Ole Miss. Alabama is going to be pretty high because they should be in front of Georgia because they have a win over them. They also have a win over Missouri, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. So it's probably. I could see a scenario where Alabama's your 3, even though they have a loss to Florida State. I don't think that. I think it will very much mimic the AP. But there's a lot that we can learn tomorrow night. I think unlike the past, though, I reserve the right to still do this, but I will warn y'all if you better watch it with this committee, because the first rankings tell you a lot about how off they are, because they're going to be off some. I don't think it's insane to say Indiana is your number 1, but I think that at the end of the day, it'll probably be Ohio State. It'll probably be Ohio State, then Indiana, then Texas A&M, then Alabama, then Georgia, then either Oregon or Ole Miss. I would probably go Ole Miss. And then you just kind of take it from there. I think Notre Dame is probably back into this thing pretty good unless they lose. And I'm not sure I see them losing. You've got both BYU and Texas Tech, who are the Big 12 sort of representatives. BYU's undefeated. I wouldn't say it's the most impressive undefeated season. They did smash, or they did beat Utah. Texas Tech has a sort of bizarre loss. But then the Big 12, I think, is only going to get 1 team in. And then you've got Virginia, whoever comes from the ACC. And then, teams like Texas, teams like Oklahoma. Texas needs to go on a little bit of a run here, and they've got opportunity. That's the good news for Texas. They've got an opportunity. They've got Georgia. They just beat Vanderbilt. They've got Georgia, and they've got A&M to close the season. So Texas is in a situation now where if they win their last 3 games, they very well could get in. I think for Georgia, the challenge right now is, are you sure you want to lose a second game? It is everybody's got to kind of play each other, and I'm not sure Texas gets in. I'm not sure Texas beats Georgia or A&M, but it's I don't know. Georgia's got a couple of really good wins, and then you look at Notre Dame, what's their really good win? SC, I guess, because they lost to Miami, they lost to Texas A&M at home. They lost to Texas A&M. And all they close out with is Navy, Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford. Georgia has the opportunity. My suspicion is, and I don't think this is what will happen, but my suspicion is that if Georgia loses 1 more game, they're still in, because that means they will have beaten either Tech or Texas. And in theory, could mean that they beat both. But my suspicion is they'll win all of their games. But it's November. We've gotten to the silly season, and Texas A&M looks like the best league challenge to Alabama right now. I think that for Georgia and Ole Miss, them getting into the them getting the SEC championship game, particularly Mississippi, is tricky. For A&M, if A&M loses a game, Georgia will go. If Georgia doesn't lose a game, you have to think about it. Georgia only has 2 games left in league play. That's it. And once they're done, Saturday night, 7:30, at the Omni on TBS, they're going to play on ABC against Texas, 7:30, which was a suspicion at the beginning of the season, but with the way that Texas played during the middle part of this year, and particularly the beginning, there was no certainty of anything after a while. That game will be Georgia's last SEC game, whereas Texas will have to play Arkansas and A&M. I think Alabama that day has Oklahoma, and they still have Auburn. So there are a lot of, there's a lot still left to occur along the way. Tennessee and Vanderbilt, they both now need help. I think Vandy, when your best win is probably a Missouri team that's going to kind of get on down the road here, they needed that win over Texas, and it didn't happen. So if you're Georgia, that was such an emotional game against the Gators. I think in a way it's really good they're playing on the road, to be honest with you, because if they were playing this game in Athens, there would be a hangover. I think there will be some hangover, but when you're on the road, particularly playing early, you can get through that quicker. I mean, the team gets together on Friday anyway, but like they'll get to be able to kind of go straight into football mode, do the travel to state, which is not a hugely long flight at all, and just take it from there, because there will be a hangover of some sort. But for Georgia, they seem to have a hangover consistently. I'm not surprised with the outcome of the Florida game. I'm not necessarily surprised that it was, I was surprised that Georgia took that long to get the lead late in the game, but they got it. And, you got to just keep winning at this point. You need to win as many games as you can before the Tech game to make it to where that game is basically irrelevant. It's possible Georgia could lose that game and still play in the SEC championship game and still be so it's kind of a mess on that front. It's hard to reconcile everything. It was hard to watch Tech. It's hard to understand how Georgia Tech could have a player go for 500 yards of total offense and lose by 12. But they did, and now you gotta, Tech's got to brace from here on out too. They're probably not getting into the playoff without. I mean, they're not getting into the playoff without winning the ACC the way it looks right now. So, all of the narratives we build up in our head, all of the things that we think can happen, we get to the end of the year, and you got to just win. And all of the if this happens, if that happens, I mean, Florida's 3-5. And, Georgia's 7-1. And it's not about, was that a touchdown at Auburn? It was not. Was that a catch again for the Gators? It was not. Was that, could Georgia have lost to Tennessee? For sure. Should they have lost to Alabama? Probably not, but they did. So it's not about the what ifs and all these things. It's like, you got to now we're almost in December. And you need to still be surging forward. That's the question for Georgia is, are they getting better right now? Because they seemed to. And then the Florida game was a little bit of a step backwards to me. What Kirby said after the game was exactly right. This is not his quote, but they need to be a little more stable, generally speaking. And they were trailing Florida in the run game going into the fourth quarter. So that was just not an ideal situation. They can still clean things up. They don't have to play their best game in November. They don't have to. But once you start getting to December, you're going to have to. And there could come a time where you do have to play your best game in November. We've seen Georgia have the ability to do that. We've not seen them do that this season. So maybe this team's not capable of that. I don't know. But we've seen Kirby's teams do that consistently over time. Thanks for watching.